This is the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ty Higgins. Ohio and many other parts of the U.S. are at elevated risk of electricity supply shortfalls during extreme cold weather this winter. That's according to a new report released by the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, otherwise known as NERC. To join in the conversation this week on the podcast, Craig Grooms. He's COO and incoming president and CEO of Buckeye Power and Ohio's rural electric cooperatives. Craig, welcome back to the podcast. Great to see you.
Hi, Todd. Great to see you as well. Thanks for having me.
So here we are. We're in the middle of December, heading into winter. We talk a lot about reliability of electricity this time of year. 2024-2025 winter reliability assessment, as I mentioned, from NERC for this winter season. As you look at that report, are we better? Are we worse? Are we the same as the past few winters? How's the outlook?
I would say we're slightly worse off. There's some changes, and it all comes down to how severe is the weather during the winter time. So we really have to go back to December of 2022 for our last bout of severe cold weather where we had some challenges on the power grid. There were some rolling blackouts outside of Ohio. Last winter was generally pretty mild outside of a couple of weeks, so there were really no concerns. And I think that's what we're looking at now. Outside of severe cold weather, things should generally be okay. No real concerns. We have adequate supply. We are seeing higher demands in central Ohio, across the country in different pockets. We're seeing higher demands, but if it's just a normal cold winter, we should be okay. We're dependent on pipelines for natural gas supply to our power plants. Coal plants have fuel on site. Nuclear power plants are very dependable. We should be fine, right? And you use the classic term should. But when it gets cold, when it gets close to zero and wind chill gets negative, that's when we start to have concerns with power supply and natural gas supply.
You looked at this entire report. What sticks out to you about it as it pertains to what this scenario could mean for rural Ohio as a whole?
Yeah, it's a continuing message of more reliance on natural gas. So we use natural gas for heating, throughout Ohio, across the country. Now we use it. We're dependent on natural gas for a lot of power generation. We're seeing more load growth, primarily from data centers. The economy is generally growing at a stable rate, so we're seeing more demand, and we're seeing less dispatchable generation. We slowly are seeing coal plants continue to retire outside of Ohio right now, but that's still continuing. We have a sort of an avalanche, if you want to call it that, of environmental regulations that have been released over the last couple of years with the intention of shutting down even more dispatchable thermal generation. So that's been a concern. But again, I think we're in a decent place going into the winter outside of the very severe cold weather, where I think we will start to see or possibly see more public appeals for conservation of electricity if there's a forecast for weather that approaches 0 degrees with negative wind chills.
We'll talk about what we as customers can do to prepare in a bit, but let's talk about what you're doing there at Ohio's Electric Cooperatives and Buckeye Power. How do you get prepared to make sure that we all have electricity throughout the winter season?
Yeah, it starts with winterizing our power plants. And so, going back the last few years, there's been a number of new winterization standards. So NERC does this reliability assessment report, but they also are responsible for issuing reliability standards that the industry has to follow. So essentially, those are the electric utility laws that we have to follow and comply with. So we make sure we've identified all of our critical equipment at the power plants. We have heaters, we do all the things to contain this equipment and make sure it's protected from severe cold weather. And those are best practices that we follow at each of our power plants, and really what the industry is supposed to do. NERC manages this process, and they have the ability to enforce these standards if they believe companies are not following the requirements. But again, we winterize all of our power plants to ensure that they're available when it's coldest outside.
So important that you make those preparations, but it's also important that on the consumer side, things are done to prepare as well. What is some
Right.
advice you can give to help us conserve energy should we approach these extreme cold events that may happen over the winter months?
Yeah, I like to say, it's our responsibility of getting electricity to the house, right? You would hope most consumers don't have to worry about getting electricity to their house, and they shouldn't worry about that. but they should always be prepared, right? So if it's really windy out, if it's severe cold, there's always the chance that a tree could take a line down, that we could have some other disruptions. So just practical things, I think, blankets, flashlights, the typical things that you would manage with the lack of power. But the fact that it might happen when it's really cold out, having a heater and a portable generator is not necessarily a bad idea. I hate to advise everyone to go out and buy portable generators, but having something just in case, even though it's a low probability event, it's always good to have something just in case. And in terms of helping the grid stay reliable during those kind of conditions, if we do get to a point where authorities start to issue public appeals for conservation, right? They're asking consumers to lower their use of electricity. We typically advise only do something that's safe, right? Don't do anything that could jeopardize the safety of you and your family. If you can lower your thermostat a couple degrees, that helps. When you multiply that out across the population, it has some pretty significant impact. Making sure your home is winterized as much as can be. Try to limit any kind of air gaps, anything that really allows the outside environment in that causes you to use more electricity. That's always good. If we do get to a point where there is a public appeal for conservation, we would say, well, try not to use your large appliances. If you have an electric vehicle, don't charge your vehicle at that time. Although I understand you don't want to get into a situation where your car has no fuel, and that fuel is electricity. Again, taking safe, practical steps. When you multiply that out across the population, it has a significant impact.
I never realized how important it was to conserve electricity. My dad was adamant to leave that front door shut and ask me if I was born in a barn, more than
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can
we've
count.
all lived through that. Yeah, we've all had our share of that.
Now, as a dad, I got to make sure the kids keep those doors shut.
That's
Very
right. That's
important.
right.
And it could be a long winter. You never know here in Ohio, but you're getting prepared on your end. And now we'll get consumers and farmers across the Buckeye State prepared on our end. Craig Grooms, he is the COO, incoming president, and CEO of Buckeye Power and Ohio's Rural Electric Cooperatives. Thank you so much for the insights and getting us all prepared for what hopefully will be a decent winter ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, agree. Thanks, Ty. Nice to visit with you.
Hi, I'm Brian Baldridge, Director of the Ohio Department of Agriculture and 7th generation farmer. We know farmers care about conservation. Join the thousands of H2 Ohio participants who are already implementing best management practices on their farms and receiving incentives. Program enrollment soon will open to farmers in the 10-county Western Lake Erie Basin expansion area. To join H2 Ohio, soil tests must be up to date to meet program requirements. Contact your local Soil and Water Conservation District or visit h2.ohio.gov for more information.
As the nation's #1 insurer of farms and farm families, Nationwide has long been a reliable resource for rural America. And while the current surge of data, technology, and globalization promises incredible growth potential, each new opportunity is shadowed by rising threats like security breaches, GMO contamination, and supply chain failures. This business is about adapting. It demands a protector just as forward-minded. It demands Nationwide.
Welcome back to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast, the Young Agricultural Professionals 2025 Winter Leadership Experience. A great opportunity to build your personal and professional skills, network with ag leaders, learn how to make a difference in your communities, Farm Bureau and Ohio agriculture as a whole. Coming up on February 7th and 8th, heading back up to Sandusky at Kalahari for next year's Winter Leadership Experience. Joining us to talk more about it, the retiring state committee members of Y.A.P, chair couple Luke and Kayla Durbin and Greg Williams. Welcome to the podcast, all.
Hi.
Glad to be here.
So I want to start with Luke and Kayla. Tell me, I want to get to know you all a little bit before we get into the Winter Leadership Experience, and I want to find out more about your time on state committee. It is quite a commitment, and those 2 years go by awful quick. But tell me about yourself and your farm background there.
So we farm with each of our own families on 2 separate grain farms. I farm in Tuscarawas County with my family, and she farms in Coshocton County with her family. So we have a lot going on at home, and she had kind of a hard time convincing me to sign up for all this. I mean, we've finding something to do isn't usually really a problem for us. So adding to that plate wasn't necessarily something I wanted to sign up for, but it's been well worth it. This has been a great experience so far, and unfortunately, it's coming to an end. It went by fast, but we grain farm, corn, soybeans, and wheat. And then she and I have a herd of beef cattle. We raise Simmental purebred seed stock beef cattle. So,
Greg, tell us about yourself.
I'm from Scioto County. I live on a small farm. I grew up on a small farm, just hobby farming with a goat herd, mainly our show stock that we had for 4-H. Always wanted to expand that a little bit. Kind of as the rest of the committee kind of knows, it's been quite the adventure from whenever kind of how my path has taken, even on my time on this committee. But currently, we've been partnering with a local dairy, Amish dairy, that is giving us access to their dairy bulls. So we're feeding those out, and we actually sold our first 3 just last month. So we've fed those out and starting that market, hopefully for some direct to consumer products that we can have a good quality beef out to the local community.
Just like a lot of young people across Ohio involved in agriculture, you all are so busy, yet you take on this leadership role of the Y.A.P State Committee. Luke and Kayla, you mentioned just how much you have going on, and I know she had to talk you into it, Luke, but what are some of the highlights? It's more than just winter leadership experience. You have the DC leadership experience. You grow the base of Y.A.P during your tenure there. There's a lot to do and a lot of things to really look back on and be proud of.
Yeah, so I think one of the main things we're taking away from it is just the connections, the relationships that we developed through this, relationships and connections we didn't know we needed. Everyone's going through the same struggles and triumphs in this industry, and whether it was sitting in Columbus or in Salt Lake City or Jacksonville, whether it was with our committee members or board of trustees or just members in general, I think that's one thing we're really taking away from it.
Greg, you mentioned growth as a person, and we talk about professional development through Y.A.P. You've done quite a bit of that over your 2 years on state committee.
I have. So I work off the farm as a school psychologist, and so my, connections that they're built by these experiences. And so, talking with the committee members, having access to the state trustees, getting that expansion just through attending the winter leadership experience has given me opportunity to kind of expand and see what different directions I can go and what different opportunities I can take my own farm. And so having that opportunity has been awesome.
You guys have put so much work into this winter leadership experience. And, going back to Kalahari, but there's a lot of things that are different this year. And Luke and Kayla, I want you to talk about that a little bit because I used to get carded when I went to the winter leadership experience to work because I had to be 18 to 35. But this year, that is not necessarily the case, is it?
No, that is not the case. Our committee specifically kind of had a vision. We wanted to see something different. So often there's so many speakers, whether it's succession or a numerous number of speakers that we go and listen to as this young ag professional generation, and we go, man, I wish my dad or my grandpa was here to hear this. This would really make a difference back at home, for them to hear. And so we wanted to give that opportunity to bring those folks along, basically, especially being at Kalahari. You can bring your family and enjoy the water park while you're there as well. But we wanted to make sure everybody was able to attend and hear this great message. I mean, we've got a lot of really, really great speakers lined up, and everybody needs to hear this. So,
Kayla, what are some of the highlights for you?
So we have a full panel of speakers this year. We do not have a keynote, but we brought in 3 kind of main keynotes, I guess, that will be there multiple times during the day. One of those is Mary Pat Sass, and she will lead a session on embracing your season, which is our theme. So other speakers, we have a ag economist, Dr. Cole, coming in, and then Dr. Ron Hansen with succession planning will be there. And there's a whole bunch of others.
Yeah, the list goes on and on. You can actually find out more by going on to ohiofarmbureau.org and searching Winter Leadership Experience. You can get the full agenda to get kind of wet your whistle as to what you can expect when you head up to Sandusky in early February. Greg, we talk a lot in Farm Bureau circles about business solutions, and there's going to be things there to continue your education or maybe even update your certifications as far as what you're doing there on the farm as well.
There are. So we have several opportunities that actually occur prior to the kickoff of the event. So moving in a little bit earlier, if people are interested in that, we do have a 4-hour certification for that pesticide applicator, so people can get all of the hours they need for that 3-year certification. We do have a couple other opportunities. We have some people coming to do cottage foods. So anyone that is interested in marketing to local consumers and want to know how they can do that out of their home without having to deal with some of the red tape that's involved with that. We do have a speaker that's going to teach us a little bit about how to do that for that certification, just to give some background and different opportunities for people to get that additional professional development outside of just sitting in that classroom setting through the speakers that we have and kind of more hands-on kind of activities.
Before I let you go, and Greg, we'll start with you. For those listening who are in that 18 to 35 range and they're not members of the Young Agricultural Professionals through Ohio Farm Bureau, what's your elevator pitch? Why should someone get involved and be a part of this program?
I don't think people realize just how big of an industry agriculture is. As me coming from, as I call it, the hill country of Southern Ohio, we don't have the large, massive grain farms and the crop farms that people have in Northern Ohio. So we don't see it from the same aspect. And so we don't get involved as much as I think some people up north may. But I think that having access to those opportunities and those networking opportunities, meeting people from Northern Ohio and kind of see how our paths actually do cross and overlap and our experiences overlap, and how we can build with each other to get those experiences is crucial in order to build that capacity, from one end of the state to the other.
Luke and Kayla, why should someone join Y.A.P?
Greg's right. I mean, you make a lot of connections, and it's hard not to just echo that, because that's certainly the highlight of this whole deal is the networking and the interactions and the people that you get to meet. I mean, it's hard to even believe the amount of people in just this short 3-year term that we've been on, the amount of people that we've gotten to interact with, whether that's politicians or people in leadership with Farm Bureau or industry leaders, especially industry leaders. I mean, we've got to just cover the board. And so, I mean, that's been the highlight of it for sure, but there's so much you can learn and take away, from all these experiences. And most importantly, probably for me, at least, I like to stay on the farm. I'd just as soon be here and work and I'd be happy. But, there's a lot of days where the corn market's down or things don't look good. And it's a lot easier when you have this big network of people that are in the same boat. It makes you're not alone, and so it gives you a lot of people to talk to and reflect with, I guess. So that's probably been the highlight for me.
One of my favorite groups to hang out with all year long are the Young Ag Professionals, including this group of 3 right here, Luke and Kayla Durbin and Greg Williams joining us on the podcast. Still plenty of time to register for the Winter Leadership Experience. Again, it's coming up February 7th and 8th in Sandusky. The deadline is January 21st, but there is no better time than right now. And the event details and registration can be found online at ofb.ag/2025WLE. We'll put that link in the description of this podcast as well. Guys, thanks so much. Great to visit with you.
Thanks, Ty.
Bye.